on News Talk 580 CFRA.
I've always said, why don't we have an at-home COVID-19 test like a pregnancy test? Because then we can almost self-monitor, right? Right now, you have symptoms, then you go into action, but you could be asymptomatic. Who knows? Maybe these at-home tests, they're not going to be 100% perfect no matter what. But if nothing else, it would alert you potentially. I know there'll be false negatives and there'll be false positives, but that's part of the game. Same thing with a pregnancy test, right? But it's not like you can be a little bit pregnant, a little bit COVID-19 positive. You either are or you aren't. So Health Canada, you think, would say, yeah, if these things work, saliva tests, let's rush them through. No, they say they're not going to approve them. They say that the benefits at-home tests greatly outweigh any risks. They argue those are in favor. But the people at Health Canada disagree. They say approving these tests, they worry about the accuracy when used by the public. Concerns about the risks of home self-testing. Interesting. So how do those on the front lines in the fight and those in the world of science feel about this? Let's bring in our old friend, not old as an age, but the guy who's on here regularly, Dr. Ray Deonandan, epidemiologist, science communicator at the University of Ottawa. Good morning, Dr. Ray. Are you there? There you go. Now I hear you. Yeah. Sorry about that. Our side here. What do you think about Health Canada making this decision?
It is mystifying.
Okay.
I think they're wrong. And here's why. Testing has a variety of roles to play in this challenge, in this fight. And they're looking at it from strictly a diagnostic perspective, whereas there's something called surveillance testing and screening testing. And as a result, different kinds of testing technologies can be deployed in different ways. So when you take a pregnancy test at home, well, not you, but your partner takes a pregnancy test at home, you don't assume right away that you are pregnant. You go and follow up with your doctor, right? So this works the same way. It's a signal, it's a trigger to go and invest in deeper investigation. Health Canada's concerns are, one, that it's not a good test. Okay, fine, but pregnancy tests aren't that great either. The ultrasound is the final say. And number two is they're worried that the data from an online test will not make it into public health's hands. And I understand that. That's interesting, right? So if you test positive or negative, then we need to know about it so we can update our data and understand the pandemic better. That can be controlled with appropriate recommendations and mandating of data sharing from individuals. Like if you test positive the on-home COVID test, you have to call a certain number or enter a number into your computer. So we'll get most of that anyway.
Yeah.
So I see it as a failure of imagination on the part of the government.
So it sounds to me like it's an old policy they're applying to new information about, like in a pandemic, and is really not actually up to date in how it could play out. It's just, this is how we feel about at-home tests.
That's right. And we see this across the board in how the response to this pandemic has happened, whether it's mask wearing too. So the mask wearing, the hesitancy around that was they're stuck in the clinical paradigm, thinking about masks as things you wear in hospitals that have to be managed very carefully, whereas that's not how they're used in the public. So it's a matter of changing the way we think about these things. Diagnostic tests are not surveillance or screening tests. They're different.
So in Britain, they have at-home swab kits that are available. Samples, though, also have to be sent by mail to a lab, and test results become available after several days. Sounds like a lot of work. This at-home saliva test and the results instantly sound much more convenient and probably more successful.
Well, there are different technologies with different failure rates and different fragilities. The at-home test that you send to a lab probably uses the PCR technology. It's a little more accurate, and we would get the data for sure. The advantage there, it frees up space at the testing sites and allows people not to expose themselves in case they are infectious. So there's utility there. The at-home rapid test, on the other hand, is a different technology entirely. The risk of false negatives and false positives are higher, and so it has to be used differently, and we won't get the data, obviously. The at-home rapid test would also be really good for managing things like school openings, because you can test your kid before they go to school and really minimize the risk that way. You're going to miss some, absolutely, but if you get enough of them, you can change the direction of the pandemic quite profoundly.
Yeah, when numbers count, everyone counts.
Exactly.
I mean, getting onto a plane, wouldn't that be a great way to do it?
It would. Keep in mind, though, it's a little different there because you can still test negative and be infectious. So it's better if you test negative and don't leave your house, or positive your house rather.
Right.
So testing before you get onto a plane is not as strategically important as testing at home before you leave for the airport.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but this is what they're doing with NBA players in the bubble in Orlando, isn't it?
It is. They're trying it out. They have something called the Saliva Direct test, which is being trialed now in various places. So I don't know if that is the rapid test. It might be, but it's definitely an easier test. So even if it's not the rapid test, spitting into a cup or licking a piece of paper is a lot more pleasant than having a swab stuck in your nose. And it doesn't require as many reagents. So in the long term, it's cheaper to run at the lab level.
So Health Canada did a rethink on masks, as we all know. Will they do a rethink on this too?
I think they will.
Good.
I think they will, especially as the more diversity of different kinds of testing technologies become available to us. Rapid testing, in the absence of a vaccine, is our best way to retain some semblance of normalcy quickly.
Got to get your take on something we had actually two guests earlier. Amir Adaran, who you know from, he's a colleague of yours at UO, and also a science teacher in grade school. And the reason why we talked to the high school teacher after Amir is because Amir said that it's inevitable we're going to have an outbreak in schools because he doesn't see the plan as being enough to protect it from happening or prevent it, and says it's likely we're going to not make the end of the school year before they close it down. The high school teacher, who teaches science, went one step further and said we're lucky if we get it to the end of the first semester. What do you think?
I think you're probably onto something there. Here's why. The single biggest way to keep schools safe, as I keep saying, is to keep the community load low. So we're doing our best there. The second biggest way is to have distancing in the classroom, and we achieve that with smaller class sizes. There doesn't seem to be as much of a press on to achieve that small class size goal. And if we don't get that done, then our risk goes up tremendously. We're going to see school outbreaks. That's guaranteed. Prepare yourself for that. We'll see cases in schools. We'll see kids give it to other kids. Luckily, kids are unlikely to have a bad experience. So the kids will probably be fine overall.
Yeah.
But they will take it home to their parents and give it to their teachers and so forth. And that's why the outbreaks will happen. Now, when the outbreaks happen, the second part of it has to be, what does public health do in response? Do we have the wherewithal and the capacity and the resources to take classes out of the system for a week or two at a time so that the machine keeps rolling? I don't yet see that we've invested sufficiently in that capacity, and we have time yet to do so. So I would not be surprised, frankly, if schools were shut down sometime before the end of this first semester. I anticipate we'll see a dramatic rise in cases in mid to late October. Whether or not that is what triggers a desire to shut things down is unclear. Now, we could be wrong about all this. There's all that possibility, and I would really be happy to be wrong.
But we can't panic here. So, I mean, is there a magic number? I mean, do you close one class and send everyone home, or do you close the school? Do you close, as it's popping up in various boards, does the province say we need to make this a blanket policy? I mean, I guess we'll know as we go forward, but is there a risk that we're going to pull the trigger too soon?
Well, it's never pull the trigger as in closing things down.
Mm-hmm.
It's never wrong to close it down too soon. Because we have other ways of teaching our kids, and then we can take some time to let things calm down and open schools up again. Now, what I'm hoping happens is that we implement this cellular corpuscular cohort method.
Wow.
Whereby, I know, right?
What does that mean in plain English?
It means that if we have groups of kids who are not interacting with other people, that if a case is detected in that group, we pull them out and nobody else. And we can be pretty confident that haven't infected anybody else.
Sounds like a plan. Yeah, it sounds good.
Yeah, we do the contact tracing for them, and we let the machine keep on rolling, as we investigate, and we bring them back in a week later.
Well, that doesn't sound like you're going to close the schools under that plan.
That's right. That's exactly right. So I hope that's what happens. Now, that plan is fragile and vulnerable to after-school programs and to the bubbling that your parents do, and to any other opportunities for kids to interact, like is recess being managed? Are the eating venues being managed so kids don't interact as much? Are the buses well controlled? This is why this is a systemic effort, a all-hands-on-deck effort to make sure this is controlled. Now, this is all rhetoric so far. I've yet to see whether the efforts are being put into place to make that happen. In some places they are. Now, in Ottawa, I like that they're focusing on the high-risk neighborhoods, and most of the resources are going there. That makes sense. And I would prefer it if the province were to spend a little more money to make sure that small class sizes were possible across the board. Because everything rides on this, right? Getting schools right is so important, because if we can keep the schools open, businesses stay open. and everything resembles normalcy to some extent. And I don't think that message has been understood fully, that everything rides on this. So it's worth spending the money and the effort to get it right.
Yeah, you made the case right there. We can't go back to what we experienced early on with the shutting down the economy. We can't. It's going to kill us. I mean,
that's exactly right.
The economy anyway.
Yeah.
Final question. A lot of parents have relaxed their bubble. As the summer went, we saw one family, two families, three families, and we're outdoors. It's okay, Dr. Ray, right? But here's the thing. Those kids, it goes back to that old Breck commercial. I told two friends and so on, and it multiplies. So the more you do this, and then if you take it indoors, what potentially could happen, these bubbles of two or three families, you're asking for trouble, aren't you? So shouldn't we back it up to our very first bubble and pick one, at least for the foreseeable future, to figure out how this plays out?
Public health is the art of the possible. Is it possible to rewind people's social lives now? I don't know that it is. That would be ideal, absolutely, especially as the schools are about to open, to get things as low as possible. I don't think people would tolerate it, to be honest. I will say, though, that as the weather gets cold, people are going to socialize less, I hope, maybe. And maybe it'll happen naturally. Be less travel, less visiting the grandparents and things like that. So I'm hoping that it happens as a course of natural human behavior. But ideally, yeah, I would like to have it dialed back. Mind you, even if it was dialed back, people weren't following it that closely anyway.
Yeah.
So I don't have a lot of faith in people to follow the guidelines.
I look forward to the day we don't have to have you on speed dial. Wouldn't that be nice? As much as we love you, Dr. Ray.
Yeah, my spouse looks forward to that as well.
Well, no kidding. And your little one. How's the little one doing? How old now?
He's at 4 months now.
And a good sleeper.
Well, I think so. His mother would disagree.
Says it all right there. And you've got the pandemic and people like us to blame for getting out of that duty in the middle of the night. Dr. Raywat Deonandan, always a pleasure. Thank you, sir, for your expertise.
Thank you so much.
All right, 10:40.